Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Quack and Code, where we discuss a technical topic and also get our hands on around some codes. And today it's a special episode because we did a big release last week of PG.DB. We're going to get into that if you haven't time to get into. But the bottom line, the theme of today's live stream is all about Postgres and DuckDB. And there is really something a bit magic with the PG DuckDB, which is the Postgres extension. But with that, on this live stream, I have one of the main contributor of this extension with me, Jelte. So I'm going to bring him in directly to the live stream. Welcome, Jelte.
I'm Mehdi.
How is it going?
Good. I came back from Postgres PPGConf EU on
Yeah.
Sunday, so I'm now back into actual
Yeah.
coding a bit.
We're gonna talk about that quickly because I think if you are in the audience and watching, let us know if you are existing Postgres users or existing DuckDB user, and what are you mostly curious about the BG DuckDB announcements. And if you missed some detail, don't worry, we'll get there. But Jelte, please tell us a bit about your background, where you're coming from. Where did you work? Because I didn't mention, but you are a mother ducker. That's how we call us. So you're a colleague of mine now. But can you tell us a bit about your background?
Sure. So yeah, no, I've been working for Motherduck for about 3 months, a bit more now, I think. But yeah, something like that, 3.5. And before that, I worked for 5 years at Microsoft, mostly on lots of Postgres related things. So I worked on Citus and which is like distributed Postgres extension. And I worked on PG Bouncer, which is a very commonly used connection pooler for Postgres. And I also have a bunch of changes, like a bunch of patches that are actually in like main Postgres. So yeah, I've done a lot of Postgres things. I didn't know DuckDB much until like 3 months ago. So I've been learning a lot of DuckDB things now too, and I've been trying together with a few other people to sort of put them together in one nice package. But it's it's a challenge, but it's fun.
Yeah. So that is interesting. So you come actually from the Postgres world and diving into a bit more into the analytics side, right?
For sure. I like before 3 months ago, I was like analytics. I don't care about this. I care about like tiny queries, making them really fast. I just want to get like a few records or like insert one value, update one row. It's like that needs to happen within like 1 millisecond or less, and then that was sort of what I was focusing on. And now I'm all the way sort of on the other side of the spectrum with the analytics side.
Yeah, that's great. You were mentioning so the PG Conf EU that you were in Athens in Greece. Can you tell us a bit more like about the conference? And so it's a dedicated conference to Postgres in EU. I do believe there is, I guess, an US version.
Yeah, um there's a bunch of Postgres conferences every year. There's a few. I think like there's a few. They all sort of have this naming scheme where they're called PGConf if they're multi-day and PG Day if they're
Okay.
like a single day conference. And so PGConf EU is then in Europe. There's still a bunch of US people and people like, well, I had one old colleague coming all the way from New Zealand. So there's a bunch of people from around the world visiting, because I think it's the largest Postgres conference in the world. At least that's what they said. The one in India is also quite big, and New York is also a big one.
I see.
And then there's like lots of like these PG days. There's like a one in the Netherlands where I live, and there's one in Paris, I think soon, and one sort of combined with the same, like another PG day the day before, something in somewhere in Sweden or somewhere in Scandinavia. I think it was Sweden this year, but I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, so a lot of conference
A lot of
around the globe,
conferences.
apparently. And so what were your main like key takeaway of this conference, if you would give me like 3 highlights on this Postgres conference?
Sure. So I think one thing was sort of how many people already knew about DuckDB. I think that was like even at the Postgres conference where generally people are less about analytics than at a
Yeah, you said
DuckDB
it
conference.
yourself, right?
Yeah, so I'm like I don't care about all this analytics stuff. I'm doing small queries. So I want fancy indexes, stuff like that. And so yeah, no, there were multiple people coming up to me like, oh, I see you work for MotherDuck. I want to. I read good things about DuckDB. I'm trying it with this. So I think that's one key takeaway. Another was I talked to a bunch of Postgres committers or like major contributors that and also some other contributors that just to sort of gauge a bit what they thought of like the project that I was working on, because we were there with 3 people, all the engineers on the project, or like not all the engineers, but like a bunch of engineers on the project. And so it was fun to hear that they're like, oh yeah, this sounds interesting. I mean, it sounds cool, but they also were a bit like, oh, what are you doing sometimes? Like, oh, so like what, you're putting threads inside Postgres? That's not supposed to happen. We don't do that here. So I mean, but a bunch of people they're actually working on making threading with Postgres possible in the future, because I mean, it's going to take a few years. I would say at least 2, probably more, depending how many people work on it, but and who. But there's like the people that were focusing on that, they were like, oh, maybe like the stuff you want, or some stuff that's needed for PG DuckDB, running DuckDB
Mhm.
inside Postgres in multi-threaded mode in a sort of fast way, because there's now a bunch of issues where we have to take a lot of logs, because lots of Postgres functions you cannot call in a multi-threaded way. And they said like, oh, maybe we can make a bunch of those functions at least multi-threading safe. So, and a bit earlier than like, oh, in the 3, 4,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
already like next release, who knows?
yeah,
Um, or
yeah.
at
So
least the release
basically, you
after.
get, yeah, you get discussion around,
Yes.
basically it's kind of like innovation, what can, moving forward. So a lot of people heard about DuckDB at the Postgres conference, so that's definitely interesting. And people have been challenging the idea. And so just for people joining in and have missed a bit the announcement, so we announced, so I'm gonna actually share directly the blog announcement. We actually announced, and let me ping also for people on LinkedIn, and I'm gonna actually share directly my screen. So we actually announced the extension 2 months ago, right? I think in August. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. That was sort of the that we're working on it. That like we open sourced the repo,
Yeah.
and yeah.
And so there is and so basically the announcement of last week was the first release, the first version of PG-DuckDB, which is so an extension, a Postgres extension to run DuckDB within Postgres instance. And I think this is where it gets you get a bit the challenge. It's like, I guess, how far you can push the a Postgres extension. Maybe can you tell us
Yes.
a bit more about what do you think about the Postgres extension ecosystem today, and how do you see it evolving?
I mean, I think the Postgres extension ecosystem is one of the main reasons Postgres is so popular. I mean, Postgres is very stable. Sort of the core of Postgres is very stable, but many people want like something special out of the database, but not like a specific feature that maybe is not in there by default. And then there's sort of 2 options: either you make a database with all those features and try to make sure they all work together very well, or what Postgres did is they make a very stable core, that's extensible, so that you can have extensions. People can create the extension for the thing that they care about. So maybe not everyone wants to do, like, not everyone needs to do analytics in Postgres. So then, well, you don't need to install PG-DuckDB. Or not everyone wants to do like stuff. Like one of the most popular ones is like the PostGIS, which is for maps and stuff like that.
Spatial. So it's really like adding spatial functions, spatial data type.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it is the stack, one of the most used stack for geospatial analytics. I mean,
yes.
now DuckDB geospatial is getting traction, but yeah.
Yeah, so like this is a very popular extension, but still not everyone needs it. So it's like, that's why it's not in the core of Postgres, because there's like the core of Postgres moves a bit slow because it wants to be so stable. Like it does the storage, it does the network, does all those things. So it tries to keep that core very stable. And then you can have extensions that are maybe a bit more experimental, move a bit faster than your core database. And I think that's a really nice mix.
I think DuckDB also, I mean, is inspired a bit by that with the DuckDB extension. The challenge with DuckDB extension, and I think it's the piece of new feature within DuckDB core. And I think it's like sometimes you get the question is like, what do you put back from the extension to to the core? Maybe have you seen that in the past? I'm curious based on your knowledge where some part of some extension get actually moved back to the core.
It does happen. It's in my experience, it's usually not like a whole extension that gets moved into the core.
Yeah.
It's generally more, for instance, like a specific function that's like, oh, that wasn't exposed in a way in the core, or like an extension needs to work around not being able to hook into certain functionality. And then, so it's more making Postgres more easily extendable than it's generally like moving an extension into the core. Because as soon as you move an extension into the core, that means like the core maintainers need to maintain this thing, and they're already they're already limited on time with maintaining core Postgres. So yeah, I think one of the things that might get into cores, like I've seen some stuff, is like there's PG hint plan, I think, to allow saying like, oh, I want to use this query plan and not anyone else that you've come up with, because this is the one that I know is like has performance sort of to my standards, and I don't want you to suddenly change it to something that's maybe much slower, even though Postgres thinks it might be faster. So I think that one is, there's a bit of traction on that now to get sort of parts of that in the core, or like easier hooks for that into the core, so it can control the query plan better. I think they're still gonna stay like in a separate expansion. At least for the time being, but that one is one of the only ones that I know that I think are like might actually move completely into the core eventually.
Okay.
Because there's like, oh, we don't want to do query plan hints in a sort of a way that we all agree on, instead of
No, so now that we like understand a bit the importance of the extension ecosystem of Postgres, how did the story start around PG-DuckDB? Do you know what triggers the idea?
So I think there's a bunch of people that sort of came up with this idea a bit at the same time. Like DuckDB became very popular. Suddenly, like, oh, it's very fast at analytics, and Postgres is not very fast at analytics. So it was sort of a bunch of people came up with the same idea, either at the same time or because they saw someone else doing it and they wanted to do it in a bit different way. So I think it's sort of natural to want Postgres to be amazing at everything. That's like if you're using Postgres, it's like, oh, I want to do everything in Postgres. That's a very common. I think there's even some meme or some like, oh, why not
Yeah, just
use
use
Postgres?
Postgres.
Just use Postgres.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the people want to put everything in Postgres, and
Yeah.
this is one that's like, okay, it's really something you cannot do effectively now in Postgres, without extensions, doing analytics, especially doing analytics on stuff in data lakes. There's no way to read Parquet files. There's no way
Yeah.
to and suddenly everyone is storing stuff in Parquet files on Iceberg and Delta. So it's like being able to read that data in Postgres, just even being able to read or write that data is already like a big
Yeah,
thing.
indeed. The meme that you were mentioning, I mean, I've seen this one like a couple months
Yeah.
ago.
There's a bunch
Because
of them,
this
but yeah,
is
no, this
yeah,
is
these are vector databases, right? And
right.
one of the Postgres extension, which is really popular, is the vector search, right? So the question is like,
Yeah.
okay, do you need the vector database? No, you can just use the um, Postgres extension. Of course, the reality is not black and white and something in between. But I think it's interesting um, to see that you can actually start with that without offloading things somewhere else. And I think that's the whole premise, right? It's like, would you read Delta Lake table, to load it into Postgres for operational needs? Let's say, you have data set built by your data team around model prediction or whatsoever statistic that need to serve, operational needs. You can load it and directly read now with PG DuckDB, at least on Iceberg, right? And then the question is, okay, how do you scale that, right? And I think that's
Yes.
where
Yeah. Yes.
the
It's. I mean, it's never completely black and white. It's not always just use Postgres, but it's more this feeling of you can at least start doing everything in Postgres, and if you really run into trouble, well, maybe you need a separate system.
yeah
But I think it's more like, you can always just start with Postgres.
yeah
And the question is, when do you actually need something new? That differs a bit person by person and company by company. It's like it depends on your use case. But it's always nice to have sort of simple infrastructure. I think that's like to reduce the amount of components that you have, and sort of have just one. If that works, I mean, it's amazing. And then you can find out, okay, when does this one thing break? When do we need to replace this? And as soon as you can move that a bit more forward, it's always good.
Yeah, the 0 to 1 is really important, and I think in
Yes.
analytics that's what happens. It's like I know some. I'm not going to name them, but some popular fintech company that stayed over a long time. Like they had already 100,000 of users, and they stayed for a long time with Postgres for analytics, and they hired like really people, specifically DBA on Postgres, just to optimize everything. And I felt like it's pushing the things to a certain place where it's not meant to be initially, right? But the point is that it is possible that that's the beauty, is that people start, like, at least if they have a Postgres instance, right? They start the analytics journey in Postgres, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't
The
want to
data is
move their
there.
data.
Yes. Like
Exactly.
as soon as you need to move data, it's already like you're already. I mean, it's already like, it's a big job to sort of go from not moving data at all to moving some data. So if you yeah, exactly.
Starting with Postgres for analytics is great, but yeah, there is some issue with the current state. Maybe you can mention a few of them.
Well, I think in general, sort of I mean, Postgres is very fast at OLTP, like transactional workloads. So like small queries, index lookups. Like if you have a basket in your web shop and you're like, oh, I want to see my items in my basket, or like see the homepage or something like that, like just sort of show the data that's on one page. It's very good at that. If you create the right indexes, it's sort of optimized for that use case. The whole way the code and the storage is structured in Postgres, it's optimized for those use cases, for these small things. And then it also supports doing big aggregations on lots of data, and aggregations on like stuff with indexes. If you can use those indexes correctly, it's still fairly fast. But as soon as basically you need to scan a whole table or like a big chunk of the table, you're running into the problem that the design of Postgres and the way the storage is designed is not really optimal for that specific use case.
Yeah, so row-based versus,
Yes.
columnar formats. Typically in
Yes.
analytical, everybody eats Parquet. Even table format, right, behind the hood is Parquet and metadata file. So that is where basically analytical database shine to, do aggregation, group by on specific column. I think like one thing that I want to touch down is that maybe directly from debate, because we had feedback from the community around that. You mentioned, you have indexes in Postgres, and actually you can run some analytical query, and that's fast. But there is two things: is that the right index for my analytical query? I believe they serve different needs, right? And second, like what could be the other challenge that you have to add other index for analytical purpose?
Well, I mean, there's a few challenges. At first, a lot of analytics is much more trial and error query wise. I think you're like, I wanna do this thing. I wanna writing a query, and this trial and error part, you don't really know exactly what your query is. So how can you even know what index you need to have?
Yeah.
And if you create that index before, I mean, creating an index also takes a lot of time. Like it can take hours if you have a big data set, or even longer. So sort of doing that trial and error, I think that's hard if you don't have the right indexes. Another thing is that even if you figure out what query you want to run, and you're like, okay, I need to create this index to make it go fast, then having lots of indexes on the table also incurs some performance overhead. Basically, every insert and every update needs to change that index.
Yeah.
So yeah, that means all your other traffic is going to be a bit slower.
Yeah. So basically, you have your data on Postgres with some index, you start some queries. First, if your index is not correct, you don't really know that. You need to kind of like execute the query, and the development loop process is pretty slow because creating an index is slow. And even if you find out which index you do, you may have more indexes, one that serves, the transactional workload that you have, and the other, the analytical workload that you have. And then every insert is going to be slower because due to those indexes. Is that correct?
Yes, that sounds exactly correct.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't want tons of indexes on every table. Like, yeah, I think that's one mistake that almost every first-time database user makes. They learn about indexes, and they're like, I want to create indexes on all my columns. I've definitely done that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good tip. We can maybe ask in the audience who had too much indexes. Does it support calculation bigger? So we have a couple of questions already around DuckDB extension. We're gonna go directly now into the main meat, and I'm talking about Postgres. So we're still gonna talk about Postgres. So we released the plug. You can follow along. The best way to get started, we have a Docker image. What's built in that Docker image to get started?
Sorry, what's built in? It's
Yeah.
like the main. Basically, it's the main, like the official Postgres image plus the PG DuckDB extension, and it sets
Yeah.
up the configuration automatically. I think it automatically installs it even, so you don't have to do that. As
Yeah.
far as I remember.
And so we have, I think, on Docker Hub, a couple of different flavors, right?
Yes.
So depending on the Postgres version, because that can be a bit tricky to build the extension depending on your Postgres version, just to try it out. So the best way is just to use the Docker image, point to the Postgres version that you have, and the PG DuckDB is already installed. If you want to run a client, either you pass a password. Here in the example, I just added host auth method trust because it's just a playground, and then you can start basically your PSQL client. And so you run also a couple of benchmark, but actually just one benchmark. So that's like, by the way, you should never choose your database based on benchmark. That's one thing.
I mean, definitely not other people's benchmarks. You should always, I think, you should always run your own benchmarks. Like,
yeah,
that's like, yeah.
yeah. So
benchmarks
don't
are a
just
useful way to, yeah. Don't
yeah.
trust
No,
people on the internet.
go ahead. What's
Don't
your
trust people
opinion,
on the
Aaron?
internet in general.
Yeah, that's the summary. Even ourselves, all right. Do your own homework. But if you want to actually just reproduce that, we have on the PG DuckDB open source repository. And by the way, I haven't shared this one. So if you want information about the latest, this is the place to go, right? But so there is also this script, which is basically calling the extent. It's a built-in extension for TPC DS
in DuckDB, yes.
In DuckDB, and so you can choose a scale factor in the script. Basically, you call the script, choose and call a number, and then after it, use the PSQL client to basically load the data from the output of CSV from the DuckDB client. So you can do that, and I believe I have the image right here. So below, let me a bit zoom that so that people can see. So I believe, yeah, DuckDB client is also installed in the Postgres image. Is that correct? I'm not sure if I installed it.
I don't think it's installed in the Postgres. I mean,
Okay.
maybe it is, but I didn't note that.
Okay.
I guess it might be.
It might be. I'm not sure if it's me that install it or, but you can check it out. But you can also basically use this script to run this benchmark and play around the scale factor if you want. There is also the TPCH extension in DuckDB, so you can easily generate data sets for that benchmark if you prefer, and then run specific queries. And so that's what you did. I lost the blog. Basically, for this, you run it on locally, I believe, and then on a EC2 instance.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so you did a factor of 1, and so I had the timing, and we saw that. So you don't need to do any install extension when you use the Docker image, as Jelte said. If you really want to install it on your own existing Postgres instance, you're going to need to build it, and you can follow the instruction on the README. But one important thing here is that those benchmarks are not using the indexes. So we don't create, like in the script, you don't create indexes. Can you touch down a bit on that?
There's 2 reasons. One is because I think it's still sort of I think there's even 3 reasons. There's 2 in the blog post, and there's really a third. The first one is that it doesn't. Right now, index support is not implemented in PGDuckDB. So PGDuckDB always does like a sequential scan of all your data. And well, we're working on that. It's definitely high on the feature list for the next release. And so doing a comparison 1-to-1 if you had index in Postgres and if you don't have indexes in they're still there. Then it's not really a 1-to-1 comparison, so that makes it so then the results don't really make sense necessarily. And like I said before, it's not always a given that you have indexes for all your queries.
Yeah.
This is more like, sure, we could create perfect indexes and make it super fast in Postgres, but maybe you don't want to do that for your own actual queries. And then sort of the third reason is that setting up TPCDS is like a pain in general. Like the DuckDB thing made it very easy, but it doesn't include creating indexes. But there's like the whole TPCD, like the actual TPCDS benchmark suite also has like a create schema and a load stuff, but it's compiling it. It fails to compile on like modern Linux. At least it didn't compile by default, so I had to change a bunch of things. And at some point, I just sort of gave up trying. So yeah, I think that's sort of the third reason. It was just too hard to get it working with indexes within sort of the time I had for the benchmarks and the time we wanted to publish the first release. That I was like, okay, well, I just won't do indexes for now. It makes sense, and it makes sense also from the other perspective.
So we have a couple of questions I want to address from the audience.
Sure.
First, this one. Does it support calculation bigger than the available memory, just like DuckDB does?
Yes. So yes, it does. If you run into problems, in general, if you try it out and you run into problems with any of it, please report it. It's like the first release, so there's bound to be some bugs. But yes, it should just be fine. It will flush the disk, and then it's going to be okay.
Alonso has another question. Can it be installed in cluster of Postgres that are using and not using Citus?
Yeah, I worked on Citus a lot, so I don't see a reason why it wouldn't work. That should work fine. I don't. Well, okay, maybe not. With Citus, it might be hard because Citus hooks into the planner a lot, and we also hook into the planner a lot. So there's actually probably going to be some issues. It depends a bit what you want to do. I think if you install it on the workers with Citus, like you have a coordinator that does distributed planning. Like you give it a query and it's going to send lots of small queries to the workers. I think if it's going to do a query on the worker, it's going to be fine because Citus doesn't touch any of the planning, and that's generally also with other clusters of Postgres. If you do sharding some other way, it's like you have sort of one node that does the distribution of like making lots of sharded queries and then combining the results. And if like those sharded queries they use PGDuckDB, I think that should be fine. But if you want to combine like the result from a distributed table in Citus with reading a Parquet file on the coordinator, then that's probably not going to work.
Okay. TLDR, it must be tried, but it's worth a try. I think I want to address also something which is a bit related, is that there is cloud provider, Postgres cloud provider that is gonna come to support this, because usually cloud provider that offer managed Postgres as a restricted list of supported extension, right? And so PGDuckDB is getting a lot of excitement around this, and so we're gonna have some support over there. So if you're using any managed Postgres services, please let us know in the comments so we can prioritize based on the needs. We've heard a lot of people coming back at us around AWS RDS already, But let us know in the comment if you are using managed Postgres service, which one is it? That would help us to prioritize the work. So coming back to the queries, so we have the TPC-DS dataset loaded to Postgres. We haven't created index, and we realized that basically the query is much faster. So the same query using the DuckDB engine through the Postgres through the PG DuckDB extension versus pure Postgres. It was much faster, and you get the same performance when you were doing larger data sets on the
Yes,
EC2?
yes, it's very similar. But basically this query without indexes, at least it doesn't. It like the plan from Postgres, it Postgres gets very confused. It's gonna do something very slow, and then and it's gonna do that many times, and so it's not. This is definitely not something that happens for all queries. It's but I think there were 10 or so queries in the TPCDS benchmark that took more than 10 minutes when I was testing them. If you were executing them on Postgres, we're using Postgres, and less than a minute when executing them and using DuckDB. So there's definitely, I mean, there's definitely some queries that Postgres just doesn't understand very well how to make them go fast.
And so we also mentioned in the blog that the index support index scan and index only scan on Postgres is a priority for the project. And we had actually a question related to that, as you can see. So when you're talking about index support for PG-DuckDB, are you talking about creating index within DuckDB or reading Postgres' indexes?
So in this case, it's really reading. I mean, both don't work, but the reading Postgres indexes is very high priority. Creating indexes on data in DuckDB is less useful in my opinion. Also, but it's also less on the near horizon, I would say.
Yeah.
But reading Postgres indexes, that's just necessary because sometimes you just want one value out of a Postgres table to sort of like a few values to hydrate some of the data that's coming out of your analytics. Just adding some extra user information, something like that.
Yeah. And that also would make the comparison even a bit fair, because then you could say, okay, if you don't have the proper indexes for the analytical queries, then PG-DuckDB is a good solution. But then we need to know, how PG-DuckDB will perform once we can also read the Postgres data, right?
Yes.
What's your expectation about that?
It's a good question. I think it's still going to be, if you have queries that Postgres can use indexes for very well, I don't think you're going to have too much benefit from DuckDB execution alone. Like using only data in Postgres tables, I don't think you're going to have a huge performance benefit. Maybe it's still even going to be a bit slower because there's some copying involved from going from Postgres to the DuckDB execution engine. So there's some overhead. So you sort of need to win that overhead back. So if you don't have lots of data inside DuckDB, then that overhead is very hard to win back.
Yeah.
But,
I see.
But the nice thing is that you can combine it with reading from Parquet files or your data lake. I think that's where we're going next, probably.
Exactly. So that's the cool thing about DuckDB is its extension. So there is already extension for many table format for different table formats and different file formats. And that support out of the box with some of them with PG-DuckDB. So that extends basically your Postgres to be able to read your S3. So I actually want to demo this live. I have my Postgres instance that I just show you. Let me just run the Postgres client. So the extension is is already loaded, right, and installed. You can see pg.db. And let me run just a simple Parquet file here. So here you can already see it. So that's the DuckDB syntax, right?
Yes.
Read Parquet. And so here, I'm not passing, I don't have any credential because it's a public bucket, but you can put your AWS credential if you want to. But what is really funny is that, yeah, I can read directly from a public Parquet using the pSQL client with pg.db. I think that's like really bringing the simplicity of DuckDB of like, I don't have to, install specific S3 library or protocol. Like DuckDB knows directly that when it's reading over there, it's reading through actually another extension, which is HTTPFS, and just specify the read Parquet. And you see, I had the result here, which is basically a data set on the top TV show watched during COVID time in the US. And yeah, so that's that. And so there is also read Parquet at the moment support, because there isn't any write Parquet on the DuckDB extension supported. So you can also...
Yes, I mean, we can. You can actually write to Parquet files.
Sorry, I meant, thank you for correcting me. I meant Iceberg. So
yes,
there is no,
right.
yeah, there is no write possibility at the moment for Iceberg, but actually that's a good point. If I go back to the blog, I think we have this snippet that show you that you can, just with a copy command, you can also write back to Parquet on S3. I believe you can join data also from Postgres table. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. You can sort of combine all of the things in the blog post together in one big mix. You can write and read, and you can write, and you can write to Parquet. You can read Postgres data. You can read from Parquet. And you can all do this in the same query and join things together.
Okay. I had a weird comment that I was running an old extension. No, there is only one release, but it's actually a good point.
Yes,
So that's a good feedback. Do you see that, Jelte?
Yeah, I see it. I mean, it's a bit behind Gregory Powers. I still see Gregory's comment. I don't. Maybe it's because
yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'll show you. It's in the stack. So this one.
Right.
Since you are using an earlier version of pg.db, no, I'm not. This is the first release, so it's possible. It's not even possible. And so he mentioned that because he saw that the extension version is 0.0.1 and the release is 0.1.0.
Yes. So we had 0.0.1. Sort of, that was sort of the development version before we actually had a release. So I think you might have a slightly older one installed. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that yeah?
Okay. I mean, maybe it's because I'm on the main. I talked from the main branch.
No, that's possible. That maybe that is possible.
So the main branch is not flagged to the latest version, but it is kind of the latest.
We should. Yeah, this is something I'll check out probably after to see what's going on. But
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, lawyers, for that. Can I install? I have another question, so I'm taking those as they come. Can I install DuckDB extension made by community with pg.db like DuckDB HTTP server? No, not as far. Actually, it's a good question, but I don't think community extension is supported.
I mean, I don't. I think so. We support. You can run arbitrary DuckDB queries with there's like a raw query, DuckDB.raw query function that allows you to send anything to DuckDB. So it should be possible to install it. I don't know how well it integrates with that's sort of the short version. Like yes, you can. Does it actually work in a way that's useful? That I don't know. because maybe you cannot easily access it from Postgres. So I don't know what the DuckDB. I guess it creates an HTTP server. I haven't heard of this extension before, but it might very well work. If you don't need to access it from Postgres, and it just opens the HTTP server to be able to read data in DuckDB, if that's what it does, then it might very well then it might very well just work. You can probably do. It's gonna be a bit weird because I think in this case it's gonna be problematic because we're not running one DuckDB. We're running one DuckDB per connection. So as soon as you close that connection, your HTTP server will stop. And if you open multiple connections, then you get multiple HTTP servers. So it sort of might work, but it's probably not gonna do what you want it to do.
Yeah, another feedback for you on the README here. Apparently, the build instruction only includes Ubuntu and the Linux side. On the Linux side, can you the extension be compiled on Oracle or Red Hat Linux?
I think it should be. Basically, I mean, the only things that it really compiles are DuckDB and some C++ files that we have ourselves. So if I'm assuming DuckDB runs on Red Hat, fine. And if that's the case, then I mean you should be able to compile it on Red Hat as well. It's just that we don't. None of us have a Red Hat installation, so like ourselves. So we didn't include installation instructions. If you try it out and you have the installation instructions, feel free to create a PR. Then you can add it because it's totally valid to have more installation instructions.
And if you run into issue, also feel free to come.
Yes. Any issue or like also any like good feedback, like happy feedback, like I used this and it was amazing, it saved my life. Also very happy to hear about that. But I expect more of the this thing wasn't working so well, or that's even just sort of UI kind of things, like first user experience. If you work on a project for like a few months, it's sometimes hard to see what the pain points are for new users. So if you see some pain points or find some things that would have made your life easier trying to use it, please open an issue or create a PR. That's any feedback is welcome, basically.
I got another question from Gregory Power here. It's going deep. Does PG.DB support reading PostGIS object through DuckDB spatial extension?
This is definitely something that keeps going back because there's one GitHub issue that is pretty popular about exactly this. But the answer right now is no. Right now we don't support it, but it's based on the sort of the amount of people asking for this. I expect it's definitely a popular feature request.
I think the reason is that a lot of existing geo stack are based on PostGIS, and people have been playing or using DuckDB geospatial kind of like on the side with some process to read. And I think if they can easily kind of like merge their two stack at the moment. That's probably the reason. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gregory, or feel free to add another comment. What is your intention behind you mentioned side violin? Come on, the release is just less than a week old, right? Please bear in mind. But if there is already a GitHub issue, maybe we can quickly find it, and you can go upvote this one. So we have roughly 10 minutes because I'm looking at the Git post. Just if I'm finding.
I don't see your screen yet.
Yeah. Wait, I'm here. So this is the issue, right? If you want to go over there and have a look, you can give some feedback over there, but there is people already asking for that, and it's coming back. All right, so we have only 9 minutes left. and I want to talk a bit about MotherDuck. The channel that you're watching this from. So we talked about using directly DuckDB within Postgres, and that's great to start. But I think as you scale further, we discussed that right in the beginning of the conversation, is that it's great to start things out, but then after that, when you scale, maybe you want separation of concern and have a dedicated system. And so the beauty is that Pitchik DuckDB can connect directly to MotherDuck, and you can have a free trial of MotherDuck, and there is a generous free tier too. I'll put also this link there if you want to try it out yourself. But basically, we put also the instruction to connect to MotherDuck. And the beauty of it after is that you can query directly data. So here now, maybe you can comment on that, Jelte. Postgres is not anymore really computing, is mostly acting as a client. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. So similar to how DuckDB, if you have the DuckDB client, like DuckDB binary on your laptop, and you talk to MotherDuck, it's also that all the compute is happening really in MotherDuck, or most of the compute is happening in MotherDuck, and only stuff that you just have locally, like if you want to join something in MotherDuck with a local CSV file or something like that, then that's going to be in on your local DuckDB client. It's basically exactly the same as that is in PG DuckDB, where if you do some compute or some aggregation on some data stored in MotherDuck, then that's just going to happen in MotherDuck, and you're not going to use your CPU on your main transactional database. But if you then join it with some Postgres tables, then that still works. Like you pull the results sort of from MotherDuck to your DuckDB instance inside Postgres, and that's going to then get some data from Postgres, and it's going to make a nice combined result.
Yeah. So you have multiple options there. So as you said, you can either query data from MotherDuck, pull it into Postgres for operational result. You can offload data from Postgres to MotherDuck, right? So that's also an option. So we give you in the blog different snippets to play around with that, to offload table, so to copy table from Postgres table to MotherDuck. I invite you to play around this, but that's also super exciting because again, the challenge when you start to set up, OLAP database, and you need to move the data, as you mentioned, it's like there is a bunch of things you need to do. Maybe you need to run a Python services, or you start, with CDC off the bat. And there is just a lot of overhead to just say, okay, I want to offload this to, analytical database. And I think here is like, again, you just install the extension, and then you can start to offload some table to MotherDuck and have your queries running there. There is a couple of other questions I want to address. Jason asks, can you explain what happens when you join a Postgres table with some DuckDB query results? How does this work?
Sure. So basically, as soon as you touch we look at the query, the extension looks at the query, and as soon as it touches any DuckDB table, or like uses read parquet or read CSV, like one of those DuckDB functions that are only exist really in DuckDB, then we basically run the whole query inside DuckDB, and we have a little sort of secret database inside DuckDB that's actually your Postgres database. So it's like Postgres sending the query to DuckDB, and then DuckDB realizes, oh, I need to query Postgres again, and then when it needs to read the table from Postgres, we call sort of the lower level functions inside Postgres to read tables, like to read table data from the shared buffers inside Postgres, like the shared memory where it sort of caches, and sometimes it needs to read from disk if it's not there. So it will call some of those lower level functions to read the raw data from Postgres in it, and then it passes that data into DuckDB. And then once it's in DuckDB, DuckDB can do all its multi-threaded magic and make everything go very fast. But when reading from Postgres, it still needs to be single-threaded because Postgres is sort of assumes in a lot of places that it's running it, that it's not running multiple threads.
Yeah, cool. Another question here. Wait, which other? To take advantage of DuckDB queries, which other change in the SQL query are required? I should be able to use all DuckDB features. I noticed the record set needs to have the column list and types. Yeah, so that's
yes, that's one of the main differences between your normal DuckDB queries. Like Postgres is a bit more strict about how you type certain things, like how you type certain things. Like you also cannot do like a from at the start. Like if you do from table, that's totally valid. From my table, that's totally valid in DuckDB query syntax. But Postgres doesn't understand that. So you need to write queries that Postgres understands, and that then we can send them to DuckDB.
Okay. Yeah, so that's about it. I think we're getting close to the end. So let's just wrap up quickly. So we talked about the love of Postgres and first about the conference that you went actually last week, right? PG Conf EU. We talked about how people start the analytics journey with Postgres, and so how PGDuckDB is really relevant in that sense, right? And that it's always, not black and white situation, but the power of Postgres extension enables you to basically just use Postgres, right? At least when to start. We show actually, so again, I invite you to go to the blog. We went to a walkthrough of code. There is a Docker image that you can easily pull and play around with the PGDuckDB version already installed. Some script here if you want to do some benchmark. And then you can also directly play to read Parquet, CSV over S3, or even Iceberg directly from the PSQL client. Right back to your lake, and then we talked a bit about scaling to modern, like offloading and how moving data over there. Am I missing something? Or I think yes, I do. What is the biggest thing on your priority, and what's next for the extension?
I mean, I think there's a lot of things, but so we have to make some priorities. But I think one of the things is for sure the index support, like using the Postgres indexes, because that's just going to be super slow in some cases. So we want to make sure that doesn't happen. And especially if you want to query a Parquet file with join it with some table. If you need an index to join it with the table, then I mean you want to be able to use that index. I think that's probably number one feature. Other than that, there's a bunch of things we wanna support. Copy. There's a few copy commands that we don't support yet. And other than that, there's a bunch of stability stuff as well. We took some shortcuts a bit to make it work, but we need to stabilize some of the. We need to do it in a bit cleaner way, some refactoring, and we kind of want to do that at the start of this release, so that we don't break, at the start of this development cycle for the next release, so that we don't break stuff at the end.
Yeah. And so the best place for people to contribute, raise issue is the open source, repository. So I'll put it back there. Yes. And you have also milestones defined over there if people want to have a look on what's going on.
Yeah. We also have a channel on the DuckDB Discord server.
Okay.
So there you can also ask questions. So if it's really an issue or something, it's generally, use your own judgment, think where it's most appropriate to post. But if it's like a short question or or like, oh, this is awesome, or something, I don't know, that you're like, oh, we don't want to pollute the issues with that, then feel free to post it in the Discord. We'll also take a look at that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, and thank you for joining the live stream. Quacking Code is happening every month. If there is any topic you would like me to cover, please don't hesitate to reach out. Again, the link will be, the full live stream will be available on our YouTube channel, which is DuckDB. And with that being said, I'll wish you a great morning, great afternoon, wherever you are. And thank you again, Jelte, for being with us with this time.
No problem. It was super fun.